think we'll wait a couple more minutes for people to come in. If you could put your name in the chat, I would appreciate it for attendance. That'd be great. Everybody have a nice weekend.
Yes, ma'am. Was doing a lot of studying.
Studying.
Yeah.
Anybody take a break from studying and do something fun?
No.
No. Okay. I've been stuck in the house with COVID again. The third time. Okay, I think we'll get started. So a couple of things. I am recording. If you could put your names in the chat for attendance, that would be great. I do need to clarify about the readings in your notes. I will share my screen. Well, chapter 6 was supposed to be chapter 8. Okay, chapter 8 is nurse-patient relationship. So if you could change that on your notes, please. Chapter 6 is chapter 8. The rest is okay. Okay, so just change your 6 to an 8, and I'll make sure I have that changed. I already did change it on the notes. So that's first and foremost. Another clarification on groups. I asked for your group to let me know what infectious disease you selected. I did change it up this term, and I had already assigned you an infectious disease. Right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sorry for the confusion. I changed my thought process for this term because last term, when I was doing this, we do this in the same assignment in the RN program, there were a lot of repeats. So I chose the most common infectious diseases and assigned groups to it. Okay, so if just stick with the ones I assigned you to. Now, there were a couple of groups that sent me what they were going to do. If it's different from what I assigned you and you've already started the assignment, just keep working on it. Keep working on what you selected. Make sense? But if you haven't really started it yet, please go back to what I assigned you in the group. Does that make sense? But if you've already started, keep going. Not going to change it up. Okay, anybody have any questions on that? I apologize for last week, had a family emergency. My little 13-week-old grandson had a stroke. So I was busy trying to get things sorted out. So I apologize for that. I did send you all 3 recordings of 2 of Dr. Kershaw's lectures last week from Wednesday and Friday. And then I had class on Friday night. And I sent you that recording. So you have 3 recordings from week 5. I had asked you in the attestation for week 5, if you could just put in if you attended a live session, because you had the opportunity to go to any of those live sessions if you could, or whether you watched a recording. So either way, I just want to make sure you got the material and it's available to you. Okay. We're coming up on week 6. We're in week 6, so we're at our halfway point. So if you haven't had time to fill out the midterm evaluation of how you think the course is going so far, evaluating the course, evaluating me, I would really, really appreciate it. And maybe if we get done a little bit early today, you could go and do that evaluation because I value your feedback. Okay. I really like to get feedback, both positive and constructive. It helps me grow as a professor, and it helps me change course if I need to. Obviously, my goal is to meet your needs as students. Okay, so I would like to hear from you with your midterm evaluations, how you think things are going so far. Okay, so with midterm evaluations, if anybody is below a 78%, I have to do, it's called a midterm evaluation, which I will send a copy to you, and it goes to your dean, and that I will send out email. Hopefully, I don't want to mandate it, but it would be great if we could meet. When I send out a midterm evaluation, it's asking for you to agree with it, disagree with it, set up a meeting with me. So those will be forthcoming in the next week or so. Okay. Attestations, most of you do a really great job at completing it at the end of class, which is the goal. But remember, your attestations, if you're forgetting to do them, that is your documentation of attending class. So even if you're here today and you don't complete your attestation, you're not going to get credit for attending the class. Okay, so that's why I try and do them at the end of the class so that you all remember to do them. And technically, if you don't, they're supposed to be done within 24 hours of class. So I try and remind you guys if you haven't filled them out. So anyway, I think those are all my updates. Does anybody have any questions? I sent you the study guide last evening. Okay, I don't know if anybody's had a chance to open it yet. It sounds like most of you had a PEDS exam. So I really spent some time on the study guide. So hopefully it's a good representation of the expected knowledge for the upcoming exam, which would be next week. Right? So please take the opportunity to look at that study guide, use that as a guide. Okay, your readings support the study guide, your weekly notes support the study guide, and lectures support the study guide. Okay, so that's where you pull all the information from, and you'll see that everything's pretty connected. Okay, the notes and the study guide and the readings, it's all the same thing. It's all talking about the same topics. It's not three different piles of information. It's all the same. Okay. So do we have any questions?
Sure. Question: will the test next week be? Will that be included in like our midterm average?
Possibly. I'm going to check on that. I was already thinking about that. With my RN class, their exams are this week, so that will get included. But as far as the timeliness, that's a good question. I had already thought about that this morning, whether I wait to do my midterm evals after exam 2. The only issue I foresee is that we won't do the exam analysis till the end of week 7, right? And so we'll be going into week 8. So I don't know. That's an excellent question, Chandra. I'll find out the answer to that. Excellent question. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? I went to a conference Friday and Saturday with Nurse Tim. It was for educators, and learned a lot about teaching and engaging in online classrooms. And one thing I heard that I want to mention was one of the presenters had stated that if students go over their material within 24 hours after their class, kind of review what they went over, that they have a much higher increase in retaining that information. So it's one thing to sit in class and listen to it, but the statistic was if you review all that material and get it organized within 24 hours of your class, you have a higher chance of retaining that knowledge. So I thought that was interesting. I also participated in a webinar called Student Success, a six-pack for student success, where it went over test-taking strategies, learning tutorials, memory tutorials, organizing tutorials. And I think it's more geared to, first, second semester nursing students, but you guys are in 4, right? You're 4th semester, or most of you. Is that correct? And so I was thinking about breaking that apart and sending little tidbits to you guys. It was excellent, excellent. And it's all, probably things that you might have heard, but some things that you might not have heard before about, being a nursing student, how to organize, how to prepare for exams, how to study, how to answer questions. Would that be helpful to you guys? I don't want to overload you. I like to provide as many resources as I can, and you can take advantage of what you want. Okay, so does that sound okay? It was helpful to me. I learned through it, so I don't know why you wouldn't learn from, even if you take 1 or 2 things away from each of the sections.
Yes, that'll be helpful. Okay,
great. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we get going? I'm going to send, I'm waiting to hear from Dr. Kershaw with regards to when she wants to do her exam 2 review. Hopefully she's going to do hers on Friday, and I'm going to do one on Saturday. So we'll try and keep with trying to catch the weekend crowd that works maybe on Friday, and then one on Saturday. Okay, so we'll have 2 exam reviews. Okay. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, I had to go back and look at my group assignment to make sure that I assigned you guys groups, which I did. So we are in week 6. The topics we're going to cover this week. Well, that's why I need to change. Okay, so you're reading. So this is chapter 8 right here. Okay, same pages. Chapter 9 is correct. And then we have our Canvas reading of occupational and environmental health. Okay. Occupation we'll cover today: occupational health, environmental health, barriers to learning, and reinforcing health education. Okay. What you have due this week, you have another HESI, and again, I'll repeat about the HESI. No, I'm sorry. Your HESI prep assignment is that document you should be working on throughout the term of topics that we cover every week. So I want to remind you that that's there. And then exam 2. Okay, you do have a NCLEX this week. Remember, with NCLEX, please submit 1 batch of 50 questions, and the topics are right in your module. Okay, try and wait to do the quiz until after we have class. And one other thing about NCLEX real quick is if you score low, do it again, because what I want you to learn from is the rationales. And I know I keep saying that over and over again, but the rationales are what you're going to learn from. So if you score 30, go back in and read all the rationales they give back to you for incorrect questions. And once you read through all of those, take the test again. Okay, and then submit your highest one. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay, so I have the book open and I have our notes open. Let's go to our notes first. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Yes. Everybody see my screen? I just need 1 yes. That's all. Let's make sure you guys can see it.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So when you think of environmental health, what do you think of? What is environmental health? What are things we're looking for?
Anything that has to do with the environment, any disease caused by environment,
Okay, like what?
like
Air,
air pollution, water pollution,
soil, food,
yes.
okay? Think of all the environmental risks that we live with in our communities every single day. Think about places you may live or people may live. Maybe people that live near airports, people that live near power plants, people that live near railways, people that live in congested cities with air pollution, people that live near the waters, rivers, lakes. Okay, there are so many environmental risks that we on any given day face, whether we're a baby, whether we're a kid, an adult, elderly adult. And I don't know about you guys, but I take for granted a lot of that. I take for granted somebody else is looking after making sure the air quality is good. Somebody else is making sure the water that we drink is healthy, that the food we prepare or that is prepared for us is done so correctly. Or maybe a new subdivision, you're buying a house or renting an apartment in a newly developed area. Would you take for granted that the soil was fine and that somebody's tested the soil over the years to make sure there's no, these are just things we take for granted, right? But think about all the environmental risks we face on any given day, whether it's out in the open, whether it's in our schools with the kids, whether it's in our workplaces. Okay. So we know that environmental hazards are responsible for over half of the disease in the world, right? And we know that they contribute to 80% of communicable and non-communicable diseases and injuries. Okay, environmental health is determined by a few things: genetics, socioeconomic status, and environmental exposures. Okay, so why do you think socioeconomic status influences environmental health? What do you guys think? Without reading this, just think off the top of your head. What about living in poverty? Right? If you go ahead, Walter.
Like people that have live in low income, they don't have the resources necessary to combat this environment crisis thing.
Mm-hmm. They may be living in crowded conditions. They may be living close to hazardous environmental risks, hazardous waste sites. They may not have access to quality foods. They may be working in a hazardous job. They may be living in older homes that might have lead-based paint. Kids may be going to school in older facilities or daycares, older facilities where they might be exposed. Okay. We also have risks of genetic predispositions, right? Family members with non-communicable diseases may be linked to environmental hazards, right? That may cause developmental delays, autism, asthma. Okay, so when we're doing an assessment, when we're doing an environmental assessment, remember, we're in community now. So your client can be an individual, it could be a family, it could be a subset of the population. Okay, so one of the things that we have to do when we do an environmental assessment is determine several things. We need to find out where the client lives, where they work, where they go to school, they send their kids to school. What is their dietary history? Why do we care if they eat a lot of fish? And why do we care where they do they get their fish from the supermarket, or are they fishing for their fish? Why do we care about that? What are the risks? Mercury, right? Okay, what about pesticide exposures? Okay, what about the environmental risks of the rural client or the migrant farmer being exposed to pesticides? Pesticides is an environmental exposure. Okay. So again, windshield survey. We've brought this up before. What's a windshield survey? You're the community nurse, and you're going to do an environmental windshield survey. What are you doing? What's a windshield survey?
Look at the big picture in the community.
It's a windshield survey, right? It's a windshield survey. You're looking out of some windshield, whether that windshield is from a bus, whether your windshield's from a car, whether you're riding your bike, taking a walk, you're doing an environmental assessment. Okay. What are you looking for? Factories, dump sites. Is it an industrial community? Is it major transportation hub, trains, buses, planes? Is it an older community? They're much older houses. Are there issues with pest problems in the community? Do you live near a dump site? Exposure to trash? And we talked about in the rural areas being exposed to pesticides, right? Another issue, another environmental risk is lead-based paint. What do we know about lead-based paint? Why is that an environmental risk?
Cause lung problems.
Yeah. Where might you find lingering lead-based paint?
Old
Old
houses.
buildings.
Before 1978.
Usually all paint peeling out of the walls.
Yep. One of the risks we talk about with lead-based paint for toddlers, say you live in an old home and the paint is peeling and it lands on the windowsill. Right? What do toddlers do? Put it in their mouth. Right? So we know that lead can get in the kids' respiratory tracts in their mouths. Right? Exposure to lead in pregnant moms can lead to premature birth, learning disabilities. Okay. And then number 5 here is pesticides. They're used in the home, not, we move out of just talking about the rural and migrant farmers, but there are pesticides in the home, right, that are used. Okay. We say that childhood leukemia is associated with prenatal exposures, right, by parents who may be exposed to insecticides at work. Okay. Exposures, we know, during fetal development can be very problematic, right? Cause miscarriages, stillbirths, developmental abnormalities. Okay. Then when we talk about water contamination, 30 million Americans drink water that does not meet the EPA's safe drinking water standards. That's pretty incredible. Do we all remember what happened a few years ago up in Detroit? Guys recall what happened? What happened?
They didn't have any clean water, or was the flood water?
And how did they determine that the water was contaminated. People started to get really sick. Okay. And we know that the quality of the water is tied to the quality of the soil and vice versa. Right? And soil, we know, is greatly impacted by the use of chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, fertilizer. Okay, water is contaminated by antibiotics and hormones and our meat animals. Okay. 50% of Americans live in areas where the air quality doesn't meet national standards. Cars, motor vehicles are the greatest single source of air pollution, followed by the burning of fossil fuels. Okay. And where do we burn those? Diesel, industry boilers, and power plants, and waste incinerators. And what are the problems with air pollution? What might we see with air pollution? What kinds of conditions may be developed? Asthma, what else?
Respiratory disease.
Yeah. Immune system issues, reproductive issues,
Cancer.
cancer. And then what about indoor air quality? I mean, think of our topic is environmental risks. So we're just kind of going through all these different potential environmental risks that are out there. So what about
is a moldy house consider one of those, right?
Yeah, indoor, that's our next part. Indoor air quality is affected by many things. Carbon monoxide, dust, mites, molds, cockroaches, pests and pets, cleaning products, personal care products, lead, tobacco. So we don't only have to worry about our outdoor quality, but air quality, but we worry about our indoor air quality. Okay, what about food? What about food contamination? You know, every time you pull up to a fast food place or go to a restaurant, or you're preparing the food or somebody's preparing the food for you, do you just make the assumption that all the proper prep and protocols were followed? I do. You guys? I do. I don't anymore. I used to, but for a long time, one of my kids, when they were 6 or 7, we went to a restaurant and he ate chicken fingers that were uncooked chicken, and he got salmonella. Unfortunately, I was pregnant again, and so it was a big problem. He was very sick, and he was contaminated with salmonella. And when the health department, when they had the outbreak, the health department did their investigation, tracked it back to this restaurant. A lot of people got sick. Okay. So food contaminants include pathogens like salmonella in chicken, bacteria in eggs, E. coli in beef, right? Antibiotics, genetically modified crops. So food contamination is a huge environmental issue as well. So what's the precautionary principle? I'm in number 9 here. Using products and practices that do not harm human health or the environment. Okay, when science is limited and it cannot be proven that a substance does not harm human health, it shouldn't be used. And you should have a reason, that should be the reason to postpone preventative and remedial action. Okay. A couple of definitions here. Toxicology. Anybody know what toxicology is? You know, you hear that, I don't know, people get into car accidents, people, the testing, we're waiting for toxicology results. What does that mean? It measures the level of chemical exposures.
Alcohol, drugs.
Yeah, chemical exposures. So when you hear waiting for toxicology results, that's exactly what is going on. What have you been exposed to, if anything? That's what toxicology is. Okay, and then another term is epidemiology. What's epidemiology? Okay, epidemiology evaluates the incidence and distribution of diseases. Okay, and how do we draw conclusions about how it affects the environment? So let's take COVID, for example. We've been investigating, researching for a couple of years, right? How is it transmitted and how is it spread? Okay. Speaking of COVID, sorry about that. So the other thing with environmental risks is consumer confidence. We have the right to know. Okay, we have the right to know what we are being exposed to. And who does anybody know the big governing agency that monitors all this? What is the big governmental agency that monitors environmental health?
This is the CDC.
Nope. The EPA, right? The Environmental Protection Agency. Okay. If you go on their website, you can plug in your zip code. Okay. And it will give you a list of environmental exposures that are common to the zip code you live in. Okay, so consumer confidence reports, or another word is right to know reports, or they're available to us, right? You can also access information about air, water pollution on your zip code. Oh, I just said that, through the EPA. You can, they will give you information about drinking water, air, soil, and it just, so if you live near an airport, what do you think some of your environmental risks are going to be? What do you think?
Well, pollution from the air from the planes.
Yeah. What about noise? Is that an environment?
Real loud noise.
Is that an environmental risk? Noise. Sure. What if you live near a railroad? You have a potential risk for a spill. Right? I mean, there's so many environmental risks out there. So in the communities that you live in, let's just talk about this for a minute. What are some of the environmental risks that are in your community?
We have issues with the garbage pickup. They had to increase the garbage pickup on some areas.
Because it was piling up?
Yes, it was bringing some, it was getting bad. And also they're doing, like they checking the drainage system because we had like a lot of mosquitoes and stuff. So they come around and they unclog those drainage system.
Yeah, excellent example. Anybody else? Could anybody else share? I'd really like to hear some of the environmental risks. Please. Come on.
You mean other than the Pollution?
Well, other than what we've talked about in the communities that you live in, are there any additional environmental risks that are in your community other than what we've talked about? And this is just scratching the surface, what we've talked about in the last half hour. What else do you have going on in your community that is risky? I'm going to skip down on the notes to occupational health. I want to cover that because it goes along with what is occupational health? We're shifting now. What's occupational health? If you're a community nurse working in occupational health, what's your job?
Getting hurt on your job.
Workplace safety. Yep. Okay. That could be where you could be working out in the field, right? In open areas, you could be working in closed buildings. It has everything to do with work. So you could be working out in the field at a plant. You could be working inside a plant. Okay, but occupational health is about the workplace. Okay, so what do you think the job of an occupational health nurse is? Let's think of primary, secondary, and tertiary here. So let's think of some primary prevention strategies for an occupational health nurse. What might he or she be doing in her role?
Teaching
Remember,
about safety, like construction users using proper equipment, goggles and such.
so she's trying to prevent injuries before they happen, right? So she's doing education with regards to workplace safety. Do you think she needs to be aware of what the job duties are of individuals? Why is that?
Because it depends what their job is affects what sort of risk they're exposing themselves to,
Exactly.
whether it be like pesticides or like dust
Exactly.
exposure.
So her job, remember, community nursing in general is mostly education. So it would be wonderful if we could focus our energies on primary prevention. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. Okay, would like to, because would like to prevent things before they happen. But with an occupational health nurse, the primary prevention includes education, right? Knowing what employees you have, knowing what their risks are. Are they at risk for noise? Are they at risk for heat and cold exposures? Trying to educate them on how to be safe in their workplace. So secondary, what would some secondary interventions be for an occupational health nurse? Remember, secondary is screening. We're trying to early identify and early intervene. So what kinds of things might an occupational nurse do with secondary prevention?
Would that be like educating them to what, educating them as far as watching films or where you have the books at the jobs with the,
Yeah, making sure they look at the safety manuals, right? What
Yes.
employees are at risk for certain environmental issues, and what can you do? What is an early intervention that you can do to help them not get
How
injured?
about shots like tetanus with that?
Well, that would be preventative if you did it before you were working. But if for some reason, let's say you get injured and you need that, well, it's early intervention, right? You have, they are at risk, right? So you've screened them, they're at risk, they need a tetanus shot. So yes,
Mhm.
you're hoping to early identify any potential problems and kind of arrest it and make sure it doesn't go any further. Right? That's secondary. So secondary is screening your high risk. So let's say you're an occupational nurse and you have heavy equipment, and heavy equipment needs to be lifted. Which of your employees might be at risk for lifting if they don't know how to correctly lift?
Oh, well, that's body mechanics teaching.
Right. Right. So maybe you target the employees that have health issues with regards to musculoskeletal system, and those are you've screened them, they're high risk, and you train them. What about what would be another example of people that you would want to screen? Maybe you have I don't know, obese employees, and that your particular job requires a lot of moving around, and so they may be at risk for additional health issues, right? So you early identify them, you work with them on exercise, diet to reduce their risk. So you're screening who's at risk. Okay, so let's move into tertiary. What might be some examples of what an occupational nurse would do as a tertiary intervention? What's tertiary?
That's the treatment part.
Mhm. Management and treatment. They already have to have something, right?
With
So
the, when you doing the PPD on your job and the mask or the shields, would that be that?
Are we
That-
checking vital signs for hypertension? I mean,
Okay, that's secondary, right? We're screening.
oh,
Would it be like rehab for patients who already have workplace injuries, like
Exactly.
they've fallen on the job or?
That's exactly right. They already have to have something. So yes, whoever just said blood pressure. Let's say you have a group of employees that have hypertension. Remember, teaching is part of all of your levels. So teaching them how to check their own blood pressure, teaching what the risk factor, what are the symptoms of low blood pressure? What are the symptoms of high blood pressure? Let's say you have a group of employees who are diabetics, and for some reason there seems to be an increase in, I don't know, absenteeism with this particular group. What could you do? Maybe get the group together, maybe do some reteaching on blood pressure or blood glucose checks and how to manage your diabetes. Does that make sense?
mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So occupational health nurse routinely coordinate and manage the care of the ill and injured workers. Yes, that's the tertiary way of saying it, right? But we also like to try and perform in the primary and secondary levels too, before we get to managing the care of ill and injured workers, right? Okay, so occupational nursing involves a lot of case management. What is a case manager? What does a case manager do? I mean, as nurses, actually, nurses are case managers in most of all aspects of our lives. Do you guys, some of you consider yourself the case manager of your family? Right? You're the coordinator of everything. Okay, you're the coordinator of care. So if you have an ill or an injured employee at your work site, you may be coordinating PT, HR. What do they need to get back to work? right? So that's what a case manager does. They're the coordinator of care. Okay, so you may be working with work-related injuries, non-work related injuries. Okay, you may be working with HR for family medical leave if they're eligible. Okay, you may be doing counseling, crisis intervention. Okay, that's all a case manager. What are the needs of the employee? Okay, what are the needs of the employee? So you may wear many different hats as an occupational nurse. All right. So occupational nurses may also do counseling on substance abuse, psychological needs, wellness and health promotion. Right? We already talked about educating on potential work-related injuries. I mean, people that work in big organizations, I'm sure everybody's heard of the EAP, right? What's an EAP? Where you can go and talk to somebody and get help. Your employee assistance program, right? Occupational nurses will work with referrals to EAPs. They're kind of, they simply need to assess the needs of the worker that's coming to them for help and have to case manage that worker and assess what kind of resources and needs they need. Okay. So in the primary section, primary interventions, what can they do? They can promote health promotion and risk reduction. What's risk reduction? There are many ways to decrease risk reduction. Okay. So maybe the occupational nurse is putting together programs that support positive lifestyle changes, lowering the risks for exposure to disease and injury, trying to help them accomplish a sense of life-work balance. Okay, smoking cessation, nutrition, exercise, weight control. This is all part of the occupational health nurse's role, right? Because what's the end goal? To keep our workers healthy, right? We can keep our workers healthy, they stay employed. Okay, so who monitors workplace safety? Everybody's heard of OSHA, right? Occupational Safety and Hazard Administration. Does everybody run for the hills when they know OSHA's coming to do a visit? Right?
Yes.
Everybody knows what OSHA is. So OSHA, I call them kind of the enforcer. Okay, so at the federal level, there are guidelines set forth for minimizing workplace, for guidelines set forth for workplace safety. Okay, each state, depending on the risks, you know, Colorado might have more specific risks than California. Massachusetts might have different risks than Wisconsin. Okay, there's a level, there's a certain set of risks that are going to be everywhere, but then the states, up to the states, to determine what additional risks their states might face. Okay, and then OSHA are the enforcers. They are the ones that make sure that the workplaces are implementing the safety standards that have been set out by the state. Okay. OSHA will always get involved if there are workplace injuries that rise to the level of this needs to be looked into. Okay, every workplace injury has to be reported to OSHA. Okay, and from OSHA, of course, we have to think about family medical leave if people are injured on the job. How do we maintain HIPAA laws? If it, have you ever gone to the hospital or urgent care and fill out your questionnaire, and one of the first things they ask is this related to your job? Okay, it's a big question. Okay. Worker and workplace hazard detection. Okay. OSHA is going to do full investigations with regards to workplace, what went wrong, what happened, what went wrong, were you following protocol, were you not? Okay, they gather information, they do their own investigation, right? Some examples include toxic exposure. What if there's a chemical spill? What if there's an accident? Somebody's killed on the job or somebody's severely injured from a pesticide exposure or a piece of equipment or not following safety guidelines. Okay. Just a teeny bit about education requirements. Typically nurses in the field go in with a baccalaureate. They require some experience in the community health, ambulatory care, critical care, or emergency nursing. Remember, even though you're in a workplace, anything can happen. Emergencies can happen. You can have severe injuries, deaths, dismemberment, right? So occupational health nurses have to have a variety of experience. You have to be prepared to deal with anything. Okay. I think we've probably already talked about this, but here's some primary, secondary, and tertiary examples that the occupational health nurse might use. Teaching coping. So this is healthy lifestyle, healthy promotion, teaching coping mechanisms. What about people who are in their jobs that hate their jobs, right? They're there waiting for retirement. They are very stressed out. What about people who have personal issues that they maybe bring to work and create a difficult environment? People that have financial issues. I mean, think of what people go to work with every day. Think of what they're carrying to work with them every day. Okay. Most don't just flip the switch and everything's hunky-dory when you get to your workplace, whether you're a teacher, a nurse, or whatever, doctor, attorney, right? So occupational nurses they're really kind of, there's a lot. There's a lot they're responsible for, right? I mean, we've certainly heard about workplace violence over the last several years. And then add the pandemic and the stress and the challenges and the desperation of people. And then they go to work. Okay. So primary prevention, obviously teaching coping mechanisms, providing healthy diet education or safety education, right? Educating on correct lifting, educating on using the correct PPE. Okay. Secondary, an example would be screening for hearing loss. What if you work in a plant that's really loud? Right? Who's at risk for hearing loss? Blood pressure screenings, screening for stress and burnout. How important is that? Do we want to identify our employees who are really struggling with stress and burnout? Sure. Why is that? Stress and burnout lead to You know, some people can go to very dark places in the workplace. Okay. Tertiary. Again, working with people who've been injured. All right, maybe working with people who have certain diseases or diagnoses and helping them manage that. Okay. So questions about occupational and environmental health. I want to just jump to our module real quick, because you have a reading sheet. Okay, instead of being covered in the book, this topic is covered here in your module. Okay, I'm sure we've covered most of this, but please, you are responsible for reading this as well. Okay, so this is just additional information about occupational and environmental health nursing. Okay. I don't think we need to know anything about the history, but a couple of additional things we'll add. Poor employee health costs businesses up to $1 trillion annually. Right, so businesses do look to occupational environmental health nurses, okay, to help maximize employee productivity and reduce the cost of disability. Try and have fewer on-the-job injuries, absenteeism. Okay. So here's some of our roles. We've talked about some of these, right? We are modern roles of OHN as occupational health nurses are as diverse as clinicians to educators are, case managers. Okay, occupational health nurses are very, very important to the corporate bottom line. Right? Their roles and responsibilities have increased dramatically, right? As well as their job duties. We talked about they may be case managers, they may be crisis intervention counselors, primary prevention strategists such as health promotion, health risk reduction. They may also be involved in legal and regulatory compliance. And this has to do with OSHA. And we talked about this at the very beginning. Workplace and worker hazard detection. What do your employees do? What are their risks? How can you prevent an injury? Okay. Okay, and here's your nursing process. You're assessing the health status of employees, right? Then you analyze your assessment data, formulate your diagnosis. Again, this is a perfect example of how you transition your ADPI into the community setting, and more specifically with this topic, how you translate it into occupational and environmental health. Okay. Then you identify some outcomes. Then you plan. What are you planning? Are you planning an education program? Are you planning on working with groups that might be at high risk for physical injuries? Pardon me. Are you working with groups of employees who have the same diagnosis and helping them to manage better? And then you implement your interventions with whatever group you're working with. And then you evaluate your response to interventions. How are you doing towards the desired outcomes that you originally set out to do? Okay. Use your resources. As much professional occupational nurses are always doing professional development, because situations are always changes. Workplaces are always changing. They may be adding equipment, taking away equipment, adding responsibilities. Okay. So does anybody have any questions with regards to that? Okay. Okay, the next two topics we're going to cover are barriers to learning and reinforcing health. So part of your reading was communication and the nurse-patient relationship. That is in chapter 8. I have pulled that up here. Okay, communication and the nurse-patient relationship. Oops. Shoot. Hang on a minute. I'm always clicking too quick. So chapter 8, and we're asked to, you're asked to review pages 115 to 117. So let's go there. Okay. I learned a quick way to do this. Did you guys know this? If you type in the page number down here. Oh, am I not sharing my screen? Yes, I am. Okay. If you type in the page, pops right up. Okay, so here's your nurse-patient relationship. Okay. Nurse-patient relationship focuses on the patient, the goals that the patient has, and whatever boundaries that you've established with that patient. Right? And how is the nurse-patient relationship developed? Well, it's typically happens in a healthcare setting. Boundaries are defined. Patient's problems are identified. What does the patient need? And what is your professional obligation and role to take care of that patient? Okay, what are some important attributes that the nurse needs to have to establish a positive nurse-patient relationship? Good communication skills, trust, empathy, maintaining confidentiality, honesty, non-judgment, cultural competence. And then it goes through and discusses some of these. So you can read through that, but it discusses empathy, non-judgment, being hopeful, okay? I'd like for you to read this part here. It's on page 115. It's highlighted in yellow. Application of the nursing process. I'm always going to stop here at this section of the chapters, because we need to apply the nursing process to this topic, which is the nurse-patient relationship. Okay, so here they're talking about assessing the patient's language ability during your first encounter. And what questions should you consider? Do they need an interpreter? Do they even understand what you're saying? Are the words that you're using understandable to them? Do they have any kind of impairment? Are they hearing impaired? Are they visually impaired? That you might need to adjust your strategy. Cultural factors. What cultural factors might be in play? For example, how much personal space do they need? They need a lot, or is it okay to be up close? Okay. Patients who have problems with communication may have a problem. It may be a multitude of issues if communication is not working. Understanding, comprehension, language barrier. You have to be able to assess what's going on. And you're already doing this in your workplaces. Okay. So we talked about QSIN. Well, I don't know if I've talked about it with you guys, but QSIN. Anybody know what QSIN is? Quality for Safety Education in Nursing. This is all through next gen. Okay, this is critical. CUSIN guides everything. CUSIN are competencies. Okay, quality safety education for nurses. These are competencies. Okay, so this is very important to take a look at. Page 115. These are your KSAs for your LPN, LVNs. And KSA stands for knowledge, skill, and attitudes. This is your competencies. What competencies must you have? We'll have a look at that. Knowledge, skills, and attitudes. You know, we always have to check our own attitudes. Seeing the value in the situation through the patient's eye. Are you capable of doing that? Do we value that the patient's views on their health? Do we recognize our own values and beliefs with regards to taking care of patients with different cultural needs? Okay, so have a look at that. Okay, really important. This box right here. And then it goes through some tips for communicating with the hearing impaired, the aphasic patient, communicating with older adults, communicating with children. Okay, so it just goes through some different groups to communicate with and gives you some tips. But what I really want you to know is these KGAs, KSAs, okay, and some and how do we apply our nursing process to nurse-patient relationship? Okay. Let's go to our notes here real quick. I don't know. We did environment. We'll cover health education. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on the nurse-patient relationship and developing that? And then let's skip to chapter 9. Okay, this is big because this is mostly what we do. Patient education and health promotion. And your reading states that you need to be responsible for chapter 9. I've gone through and highlighted some parts that I think are important to know to support this concept. So we're going to go through the book real quick, and then we'll go, the notes are nicely laid out for you with regards to health education and health promotion. But remember, the notes are a summary of the chapter. It's not two different pockets of information. Okay. So what is so for all of you that are in the workplace now, is education part of your job? And if so, in what way? I'd like specific examples, please.
Yes,
What do you do?
dialysis technician.
Okay. Lots of education.
Yeah, so we educate on their fluids in between their treatments.
Mhm,
Mainly like when their labs come, we can tell
mhm,
what, about their eating habits, what they've been eating
mhm.
a lot of, and what they need to, like maybe their potassium or calcium or something like that, they need to change. But mainly the intake of the fluids.
So you're teaching. You're teaching and teaching and teaching based on the current numbers, the current situation. Right. Who else is teaching in their job? Should be everybody, but who else is teaching in their job? Anybody doing discharge planning? Hello? Hello? Anybody? Come on. I would like to hear about it. What kind of teaching you're doing in your jobs, please.
Okay, well, we teach them also on when they're going home to do dialysis at home. So that's a lot of infection control,
Absolutely.
hand washing.
Mhm.
uh,
So we know that the ultimate goal of patient education is the prevention. I've highlighted this, prevention of illness. Excuse me. Promotion of wellness and restoration of health. Right? As nurses, we teach about their condition, their disease, their upcoming surgery, how to care for themselves after. And patient education is one of the most important roles of nurses. We do it in every setting. Okay. There's 3 modes of learning. 3 ways we learn: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Everybody know what those are? Visual, we learn through what we see. Auditory, we learn from what we hear. In kinesthetic, we learn from what we do. So give me an example of visual learning. Somebody.
So like if you send a patient home with like pamphlets,
Mhm.
I know they have a lot of those at for like cardiac
Mhm.
and other things that require care at home.
Something they can see, they can put on the table, they can look at. Give me an example of an auditory learning item. Maybe a video of how to separate your medication, video of how to take care of your wound. Okay. What about what's an example of kinesthetic learning?
That's like
Oh.
doing, right?
Doing.
Yeah, that would be like teach and show me. Show me how.
Teach-back method. Yay, Walter. Teach-back method. That's what that is. People learn differently. How do you guys learn? I like to get in there and do it. Just show me once, right? Like if my kids are trying to show me how to work a clicker, figure out how to get Netflix on a I don't have a clue. So what I tell them is just show me once. Physically show me once and I'm good. So I learn by doing it. What about you guys?
Me too.
What are the rest of you guys? How do you learn?
me too.
I'm a visual. I'm also like I have to do it in order to stick with it.
Mhm. I'm not an auditory learner because once somebody starts talking in my ear, like if somebody's trying to teach me something that's technological or how to set up something on my computer, don't tell me what to do because I can't make sense of it. Just quiet, show me, sit down and show me. So, okay, so those are your modes of learning. And another important section, how do you assess learning needs? Okay, and the rest of this chapter goes through the nursing process. Okay.
Well, the first step will be evaluation. You evaluate the patient, find out
What do they
how much,
need?
what they need, how do they prefer to their information. You
Mhm.
ask.
Yeah. I mean, you can't plan on teaching them if you don't know what they need to learn. Is it about their disease? Is it about prevention? Do they have a family history of obesity and they want to not be obese? Do they have a family history of substance abuse? and they don't want their kids getting into drugs. I mean, how do you know what their needs are? And then once you do that assessment, in the process of doing that assessment, what are their barriers? You have to learn, or you're going to need to know, what are their barriers to learning? Is there any kind of a language or communication issue? Is there a comprehension issue? Culture? Medical history? Emotional needs? How do they learn? So your assessment is the most important part. Yes, you may figure out what their needs may be, but what other factors are going to come into play during your assessment that you have to put the big picture together, right? And then here's an example of some factors affecting learning. We've talked about some of these. Insufficient knowledge, are they health literate or health illiterate? And I don't mean that to sound derogatory, but what is the difference between health literate and health illiterate? They don't understand, right? Inadequate health maintenance, they don't take care of themselves. They're a fall risk. Okay. And then just go through each of these. I don't know if you guys can hear the thunder above my head, but we're about to get a pretty decent storm. So we're still in assessment here, but really what I want you to know is just do a quick read of each of the ADPI sections. You don't need to read the whole section, but just know, what does an assessment look like when you're assessing a patient for whatever their needs are. Okay, and then drop down to the education plan, right? Once you've done the assessment, once you've developed the goals, then you've created your plan, then you've implemented your plan, and then you've evaluated your plan, right? And a behavioral objective is important because it acknowledges what you want to change, what they want to change, right? With their current behaviors and attitudes. Does that make sense? Okay, and again, it just goes through the ADPI. Okay, this I want to point out, I do want you to read this. Page 131, it's an excellent summary of what's in this chapter. Okay, getting ready for next gen. Key points. Okay, so if you don't have time to go back and read the whole chapter, which you don't need to read the whole chapter, start here. Okay, and then again, you have another great resource, self-directed, self-motivated, is your review questions. Okay, anytime, I'll say it again, any three things, anytime you have the opportunity to learn from rationales, to learn from questions, review questions, what's the third? Rationale and case studies. Take advantage of it. Those are three really, really good options where I think you're going to get the best learning. Okay. NCLEX does your rationales. Case studies are all through this book. Just because I don't cover a case study in a chapter doesn't mean you shouldn't go back and do it. And here's three at the end. Clinical judgment activities, scenario A, B, and C. And you know where to find your answers, right? In Elsevier. So, I mean, all these resources are here for you. Okay, let's see what we didn't cover in the notes with regards to patient education. Okay, we know it's the most important role of a nurse. Obviously, we want patients to take responsibility for their health, right? It's going to turn out better if they are proactive, right? But a lot of times they're not. Okay. And that was my question to you right here. Nurses should be educating in every role they work in. But I only heard from one of you. So I know what Chandra does. Okay. You need to review what Healthy People 2030 talks about related to education. Okay. So please go back to chapter 9 and look at the Healthy People 2030 section. Okay, Healthy People 2020's goals are prevention, which is primary, reduce risk, secondary, and promote a healthier lifestyle, tertiary. All right, we're assuming when we say promote a healthier lifestyle that they have an issue. High blood pressure, obesity, mental health, right? And then we talked about this. To educate, we need to know how they learn. We just talked about this, the 3. Then the other, we didn't cover this in the book. This is important. They learn in 3 different ways. Okay. But also what I want you to know is there are 3 different learning domains. Okay.
Cognitive,
Three different.
affective.
Yep. Cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Okay. So it's cognitive. It's how we think. Okay, it's that thinking part. Our ability to hear information, understand it, memorize it, and use it later. It's the thinking. All righty? Affective, it's the feeling. Cognitive thinking, affective, feeling. What's our attitudes? What's our beliefs? What's our values? And how do they affect, we're talking about your clients. What are their attitudes, their beliefs, their feelings, and how does this affect their ability to learn? Okay, that's number 2. And then the third one is psychomotor. All right, practice. So when you're doing a home health visit and you're teaching how to change a dressing, we want them to show it. It's very similar to the kinesthetic learning that we just talked about. Psychomotor, doing, teach back. Right? It's easier. Example we give here is it's easier for a patient to learn how to use their glucometer if they're doing it on themselves and they're practicing over and over again. Right? So we have to think of all of that. And if education doesn't address all 3 domains, you'll not be as effective. Okay, telling someone to change without motivating them to do so or providing them with the tools to become motivated, it's not effective. Remember, the reason why I'm really covering this is because this is most of our role. Education. If you're not an effective nursing educator, you're probably not going to, you're going to struggle. And people, probably people in your family, people in your neighbors, your community, do they always come to you for advice? Always. Nurses are the be all end all. Right? I mean, we're supposed to know everything about everything. Right? Not to say we do, but we are revered in that way. And so one of the things as nurses you need to master is education. Now, you may not be completely knowledgeable about everything you're teaching about, and nor should you be. But it's making the effort to learn about what the patient needs. If you don't have that knowledge, or you don't have the resources, or you don't have the current tools, you've never done that before, go find out how to do it. How do you find out? Research, evidence-based practice, peers, people with more experience, journals, best practices. Okay. We've already gone through this assessment. Here's your nursing process. You can read through this. Again, a summary of the book, are translating our nursing process into patient education. Assessment, planning, intervention, evaluation. Okay. So let's go through this last section with patient education. Let's talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary. There are going to be questions on the exam, which is why it's always here, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So let's understand that with regards to patient education. So here, the examples we give are teaching women to go to the bathroom. Okay, and after sex to prevent cystitis. Teaching parents how to role model healthy eating. Educating parents on immunizations, the schedule of immunizations, and preventable childhood diseases. Does anybody have any question why any of those examples are not primary? Now is the time to speak up, because you have to be knowledgeable with each of these levels. Secondary, screening, early intervention, early identification, right? Maybe teaching an elderly woman the signs and symptoms of a UTI, because elderly women may be at higher risk for UTIs. Providing education on the preparation for a colonoscopy. Okay, giving a pamphlet on the importance of pap smears. Or anybody understand why that's not secondary? Tertiary. So we have teaching a low sodium diet to a patient with hypertension. Why is that tertiary?
He's already diagnosed with hypertension, so we're just teaching them about the diet.
Demonstration of use of a glucometer for a diabetic. Why is that tertiary?
Already have a diabetic
Right,
or diabetics.
right. So go ahead. So the other thing I want you to understand about primary, secondary, and tertiary when it comes to patient education is that education needs to be included at all three levels. The education at a primary level is for prevention. The education at the secondary level is you're at risk for cancer, so here's why you should go get a pap smear. Early identification. The education at the tertiary is you already have diabetes. Let me help you manage it since you've had so many hospitalizations. Okay, so patient education is all along the way from A to Z. All right. We know this is important. Learning does not occur until the behavior is changed. Right? Behavioral changes are hard. Do you guys work with anybody or have any family members that doesn't matter how many times you talk to them, they're very reluctant to change attitudes and beliefs and behavior? Anybody know anybody like that?
Yeah, no friends like that.
I got family members like that. All right, so it's human nature to migrate towards the path of least resistance, including habitual behaviors. Anybody work with somebody who says, we don't need to put in that new best practice we just learned about, everything's working just fine? Anybody work with anybody like that? That status quo is fine. Nobody works with anybody like that, eh?
I have a church nurse that is like that. She's set on her own ways.
Yeah.
From the 70s and the 80s.
Right, right. So learn it, you know, it's one thing to learn, but to then put it into place, take your knowledge and put it into practice. That's where the real behavioral changes come in. So anyway, so that's what I have for today. Helpful? Did you learn something? What do you think? I need you guys to turn your cameras on, the ones that
Yes,
don't
it
have
was
their
a
cameras
lot.
on. It was a lot. But if you're thinking about community, we covered 3 extremely important topics. Occupational health is community nursing. Environmental health is community nursing. If you're working in the community, you're dealing with both of these. And then patient education, nurse relationship, really very, very big part of the community nurse. So could you guys turn your cameras on? The ones, Diamond, Teresa, Rosalind, Carol, guys turn your cameras on, please. Has everybody put their name in the chat? If you haven't put it in there, let's pull up our attestation, please. Why do I only have 13 people? Just making sure I haven't. Okay. So pull up your attestation and let's just write in there, Marvel. What's today's date? The 15th. And hit submit. And then you don't have to worry about doing it and me emailing you, because you got to take credit for being here. Now, my other favor is, well, first of all, does anybody have any questions about anything we covered?
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks, Chandra. And thanks to those of you today that participated. I really appreciate it. I don't like to hear myself talk for 90 minutes. So the other favor I would ask is if I give you back the gift of some time, would you guys go into your shell? You're already in there now doing your attestation. Would you go in and fill out your midterm evaluation and let me know how the class is going and how I'm doing? Okay, because I want to be, you know, we're halfway through now. I want to meet you. I have to be meeting your needs. This is a team effort. We're all going to get across the finish line together. So if I need to make any shifts in teaching strategies or the way I deliver information or the way I communicate, you got to let me know so I can change gears. Okay, I really appreciate feedback and I take it very seriously. So it would be real helpful. So if you could go in and do that with your break here, that'd be greatly appreciated. And that's all I have for today. Do you guys have any questions? Or I'm going to put out the few clarifications to everybody about chapter 6 really being chapter 8 and about groups. I've already signed groups, so not sure what I was thinking. So anybody have any questions? I'm happy to stay on if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a really good week. And I'll send you the recording as soon as I get it in case you've missed parts of it and want to go back and have a listen. Okay. Good to see everybody today. Have a wonderful week.
Miss Marvel,
Yes.
quick question. So the book that you have is edition 6, I believe.
What book are we talking about, Diamond?
The fundamentals book.
Uh-huh.
And I have edition 5.
Okay, so you need to go to in your module, under student resources, it has the conversion code. And it tells you exactly where the information is found in edition 6. And I sent you an email back. So it's in your email.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Jocelyn, do you have a question?